but like I know
Sorry, go ahead.
you're fine. I know tomatoes are inflammatory, or can be. So I'd kind of like, I guess, some advice on, I guess, avoiding certain foods or things that maybe I might think are healthy that are not as good for autoimmune issues.
Sure. Okay. Excellent questions.
Okay.
So the mechanisms are a little bit different. So I'm kind of gonna go and address each one. So if I understood you correctly, the first one will just start with caffeine.
Yes.
And how caffeine affects our body and how it can be beneficial for some things and not beneficial for others. Okay. So in an autoimmune picture, we already know that your immune system is going unregulated, right? It doesn't matter what type of autoimmune illness you have, that your autoimmune response or that response is it's unregulated, and so now it's attacking our body, different organ system, depending on whatever your situation is. So caffeine in general can create additional stress on the body. Okay. uh if you When you have an autoimmune condition, you already have physical stress just from the immune system being unregulated. Okay.
Okay.
And so we're already trying to handle kind of that physical stress. So that keeps your body in that sympathetic mode because we, don't have modulators on board at the time, or something to help to, slow down that dysregulation. So caffeine, because it's a stimulant, so whether that caffeine is in coffee, energy drinks, iced tea, chocolate even,
Yeah.
it's the same across the board. Now, the amount of caffeine differs per food, right? So like coffee is the highest, then then energy drinks, coffee, soda, tea, then we've got chocolate and green tea, right? And so, but that caffeine, because it's stimulatory and it creates actually like little spikes of stress on the body, and increases that demand from our adrenals. Is kind of what leads to creating more inflammation, is because that demand is higher. So it's already like adding fuel to that fire, right? So if our autoimmune reactions is kind of this blazing fire that's kind of out of control, when we add caffeine to it, we are stimulating more of that inflammation because of that increased demand on the adrenals, and sort of that that increased sympathetic spikes. Yeah.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Because it's causing
Yes.
more cortisol, right? It's just
Yes. Yeah. So
yeah.
those increased sympathetic spikes is causing more cortisol. Yeah, cortisol is going to continue to suppress the immune system, right? Continue to create more inflammation, or not suppress, but sorry, we say suppress the immune system, but really what I mean is that it's dysregulating the immune system. Okay. So it does suppress things, but it suppresses that, going back to our immune, that Th1, that Th2 relationship. So then we don't have that regulatory like signal to turn off or to slow down, right? Or that feedback to say, okay, we don't need to send any more inflammatory cells or signals to the body, through the body.
Okay.
So,
Now,
Reese, do you
things like
understand how Th1 and Th2 work in your immune system?
No, but I did write it down so that I could figure it out.
Do you mind explaining that to her, Carmen? Because I think that's going to be really empowering to understand, like, this is why you have an autoimmune, is because of this Th1, Th2 relationship.
Okay.
Okay. Yes. So this is a big component in autoimmune condition. So we have, let me back up then. So we have like when we say our immune system, like you get your labs drawn, we look at your white blood cells, right? That's like the umbrella of our immune system are these white blood cells. Okay.
Right.
Within those white blood cells, we have different specific types of cells that we can also see in our labs, like our basophils, our neutrophils, our macrophages, our lymphocytes. Those are specific, like different types of cells, and some are more apt for like bacteria, some more apt for viruses, and some can be even more elevated in inflammation. So that's a component of that. So those are so within that white blood cell umbrella, we have a couple of different lines, is what we call them. So we have sort of our adaptive immunity and our innate immunity. So innate immunity is things that we are born with, right? It's those immune cells, they're kind of automated. They go out and they protect us and they do what they're supposed to do. Okay. And those are often things like the macrophages that clean up things. Those are things like our lymphocytes, right? Our natural killer cells, our I forgot the other name of the last one. But those are the cells that are always on the lookout for things that are foreign in our body. Okay. That's that innate line. The adaptive line is sort of our library of immune responses. So I get exposed to strep, my immune system recognizes that and starts creating antibodies against that streptococcus bacteria, right? I get a cold or flu, my body creates antibodies against that specific virus or bacteria, and then it logs it into this library. This is kind of our B cells, logs it into this library so that if I get exposed again, my immune system knows what to do. Okay. Right. So then that's sort of that the B cells is that adaptive. So our B cells can talk to our T cells. So I'm getting to the Th1, Th2. But understanding that relationship, I think helps. So when we're trying to, so when our B cells start creating antibodies, then it moves to the T cells, and the T cells is really what organizes our library of things that were, that are foreign, that we've been exposed to. Okay. So the so when we get into the T cells, you have the the THs are the T helper cells. So you have TH0, you have which are kind of the regulators, you have TH1 and TH2. And so they all should be in balance. Our TH0s are, like I said, those are the regulators. So those are the ones that kind of determine, okay, if we are exposed to a virus that I've had before, right? Say I'm exposed to strep again. This is like the second or the third time. My body knows to send out those antibodies and send signals back to those B cells to start making active antibodies to go out and kill this bacteria I've seen before. Okay. And then the TH regulatory cells of TH0, the one that says, okay, we can stop, right? Like that infection is cleared. It's gotten signals from our other immune cells. And so it says, okay, turn this off, right? You don't have to send any more soldiers to go out and attack this, bacteria. So then the TH1 and the TH2, so those are kind of part of, again, that adaptive and that innate line. So we have a tendency to, if we are more like, you have more allergies, right? If we have more over responsiveness to things like the autoimmune allergies, versus things that are under responsive, like cancer, then that's usually when those TH1, TH2 cells are out of balance. Okay. So this is where sometimes I always have to double check my notes. But TH1 has to do with the bacterias and viruses. TH2 has to do with our allergy responses, right? Like our autoimmune, our allergy responses. So, and we may have things that we need to respond to that are external to us, right? That are not bacteria or viruses. Things like environmental toxicities, things like molds, right? And so we want those Th2 to be available. We just don't want them to be turned on all the time, right? So when we talk about Th1, Th2 balance, there's a lot of different influences. Oftentimes hormones can influence our Th1 and Th2 balance, but I think of it as a lot like a teeter-totter, right? Or like whatever another word for a teeter-totter is, right? You want them to be, you want your body to be able to respond to bacteria and viruses, and you want your body to respond to things that are foreign to us that may not be bacteria or viruses, things that like molds and toxicities, right? So you would like those to be pretty even, okay? And so if one is significantly higher, so if Th2 is significantly more responsive, and we don't have that balance, we don't have those T regulatory cells saying, okay, we don't need to go out and send more antibodies to, you know, XYZ, then we don't have that overflow or that overload, okay? So what happens in autoimmune conditions is that oftentimes that response is dysregulated. So you've got an excess. So you don't ever get those regulatory signals that say, hey, we don't need to make any more antibodies. We're, you know, so your body's putting out a lot of those antibodies against organ systems, right? Against your thyroid, against your digestive tract, against your muscles, your nervous system, your cells, right? Depending on what kind of autoimmune condition you have.
Okay. And so tell her where cortisol belongs in that, because cortisol suppresses one of the T1 or the T2, right?
Yeah, so cortisol suppresses T1, so then that it creates those signals so that Th2 doesn't get the off switch.
Okay.
Yeah. So if caffeine is stimulating cortisol keeps that immune switch on, and so it just further creates that dysregulated immune response. Okay. Right? So instead of giving the natural signal to say, okay, yeah, enough is, you know, we don't need to send out more antibodies. You're missing that signal.
Okay.
When we take in caffeine. Okay. Now things like green tea, things like chocolate, right? Yes, have caffeine in them, but oftentimes the antioxidants in them kind of outweigh the caffeine. So that's why, sometimes when you see things that say avoid caffeine, they won't always include green tea or chocolate, because you get the other additional antioxidants that can also keep that switch on instead of turn that switch off instead of keeping the switch on, where your immune system's still kind of going haywire.
Okay, makes sense.
Does that make sense? Okay.
Yes.
So then the mechanism of alcohol, okay? So alcohol does a couple of different things. One, it is often a lot of sugar, okay? So our body takes alcohol and turns it into sugars, okay? So it turns it into sugar, and sometimes people will have like euphoria, sorry, I couldn't think of the word, symptoms at the beginning where, okay, you know, they'll feel a little bit better because you kind of get that sugar spike. Okay. Now the way that this works biochemically is that sugar spike is actually a false sugar, because there's not a lot of sustenance behind alcohol, right? So say you have an alcoholic beverage, there's calories and there's sugars in it. There's not a nutritional, content, versus if you were to eat something like a chocolate chip cookie, Okay. Not that there's a lot of nutrients in chocolate chip cookies, but you'll still get a sugar spike. But it'll be sustained. Okay. So
Right.
Hopefully I can make this make sense. So when you're digesting a chocolate chip cookie, you're breaking down that flour, those sugars, into those glucose in our body. So you get these spikes of blood sugar, but then it's sustained. So your blood sugar continues to increase until it kind of hits a plateau. And then when you use all that sugar or store it in your body, then that blood sugar spike will come down. With alcohol, because there isn't any nutrient content in it, you'll get these spikes, but there's no sustaining that. So then that sudden drop again stimulates our cortisol, okay, and creates that chain, that suppression, and that.
Gotcha.
I don't think. Yeah, in that signal to slow down your immune system. Also, when the biochemical reaction, so this is what I'm trying to remember. So it goes from alcohol, our body breaks it down to NADH, but it's not a true, so NADH is what our body needs for energy. Usually we break that down to something called NAD, which is what our mitochondria need for support, for energy. But when we drink alcohol, it turns into NADH, so then we can't actually use that, even like, because some sugar can be fuel for our body, but we can't actually use that because it has that extra hydrogen group on it. So it's actually can be detrimental for our mitochondria. That affects our energy and our fatigue. But that increase of those sugar spikes, affects our cortisol and suppresses our immune system. Or right, like it feeds to that dysregulation. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
So what are your thoughts now, Cerise, with this information? And because that's what you were wanting. Give me some information to help me.
The caffeine, I find extremely interesting because I had really not considered how that would affect like my autoimmune in any way, shape, or form. And someone had briefly mentioned so that caffeine is like extremely eye-opening, and motivates me a little bit more because like this time last year I wasn't using nearly as much caffeine as I am now. So that's going to be kind of the motivation to maybe go back to my green tea. Or use, somewhere in there, find a happy medium. And the alcohol, like I can literally feel that when I drink. Like I could probably have told you this is what happens just because the healthier I get, like the more I feel that like almost instantly. Like if that makes sense. I don't want to, maybe not instantly, but like within an hour or a couple hours or the next morning, I'm like, well, yep, I can tell that I had a drink last night, or I did this. It's still, it's still kind of hard because it's so yummy, but especially given that I actually mix an energy drink with my alcohol, I'm probably just like all kinds of messed up. So it gives me a lot to think about. I'm not going to say like, but the fact that like someone had mentioned it to me before, but they never had gone into detail. Oh, you just really shouldn't have alcohol if you have autoimmune. Well, why? Like you're telling me I feel like crap. I can't drink something that like makes, because then sometimes when I'm in a lot of pain, having a Red Bull and vodka like chills out my body. But then at the same time, it sounds like I'm just gearing up for another bad day or two as I, do the same exact thing to myself again. So gonna have to try and find some workarounds for those days when I use it for that, especially.
Yeah. It can be a little bit tricky around both of those things, right? Because oftentimes when folks have autoimmune conditions, or if we have, like a chronic fatigue picture, we often use caffeine to help us get motivated, like do the things that you need to do during the day, go to work, right? Like take care of family. And so we often rely a lot on caffeine just to kind of get us through the day when you are in that fatigue picture. And so in the short term, I mean, yeah, it helps you start your day, or kind of helps you get through your day even, right? But in the long term, it's not helping to address the root cause of autoimmunity. Yeah.
Yep.
And the same thing with alcohol or other things that people might self-medicate with, right? When it feels like you're in a flare, your kind of body's on fire, you're in pain, you want to do something. And so that's where it can be a little bit tricky to have relationships with those things, with alcohol and caffeine, because they do often will provide a little bit of relief in the short term. Yes, but on the long term or on the back end, it can create more negative effects, right? And so but there can be other things to kind of experiment with, other things to try naturally to even help to support energy that won't have those negative effects, as well as addressing pain, addressing flares, things like that. That will help build up the body instead of prolonging the current situation.
Okay.
I would, like, if you like the fizziness in the drink, like, I know that's one component of it. I would
that's one parts of any.
I would look at maybe doing like mocktails. Like my husband's been making like a pineapple kombucha, was like, I don't know, whatever that bubbly stuff is too, like mocktails for us. And like, it's sweet, it's fizzy, but also like it has some nutritional density to it.
I keep hearing cocktail situation, and I have not ever tried it. It's just like one of those things like you like save on Facebook. One of these days I'll look at that again, and probably need to look at it really seriously.
That way you still have your drink, you can put it in your cup, and like you feel like you're getting that experience.
Yes.
And
I do like kombucha. I've just had like, I feel like it's a very needy drink to take care of, and like, does that mean like,
I have like, and I know Carmen's not gonna like this because I do have a SCOBY and I do know how to make them. I just, at this point in my life, I'm like, I'm just not doing it. I'm just going to buy the big bottles at Walmart for $10 and call it good.
Yes. And that's where, and I like kombucha explode before, like, oh my gosh. Yeah. Like that mess was, and so it's just, one of the things I was like, oh man, you know what? I'm kind of done with this for a little while, but that's okay. I can learn and I can figure it out. I'm a grown, right?
To add a little twist to mocktails, so you can check out a website called Gaia Herbs. They create tinctures. They're an herbal company. They create capsules and tinctures, but it's GaiaHerbs.com, and they actually have a newsletter or a blog or something, and you can go in their search section and look at mocktails, and they will give you recipes of mocktails. And they will also do it with herbs. So say you're wanting something to like help with sleep. Sometimes people use alcohol to kind of wind down at the end of the day. You can do like a kava mocktail. So kava is a very relaxing nervine herb, and you can buy it in a tincture, and they will give you recipes on how to like mix it like a mocktail, so you kind of have that drink in the evening. There are ones, that you can also do with pain. There's a California poppy. They call it, the scientific name is Piper methysticum, but it's poppies. And so it's a spasmolytic. It helps, it's like a muscle relaxer. And so they have like mocktail recipes, for that to kind of help with pain. But Gaia Herbs, they've done a lot of recipes over the years, and so sometimes even at the health food store, if you go to like a Sprouts or Whole Foods, and they have like the Gaia display of all the different tinctures, sometimes you can even find like a little pamphlet fold out that'll like how to make like lavender lemonade, or turmeric, like a turmeric latte. And so of course they're promoting their tinctures, but you could use, yeah.
Okay. I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, give you some ideas.
Yeah,
Perfect.
wait, or when you have the recipe, right, you can do.
It makes it a lot easier sometimes, you know, like if you're experimenting with something to go off somebody's recipe, and if you wanted to do it for like a medicinal purpose, right, you can add herbs to that, and so sometimes that can be more effective as well. Yeah,
That's good.
Okay, let's see. Let me go back and look at your other question. Oh, okay. Inflammatory.
Okay. It's easy. Well, easy to remember. I don't know if it's
That's all right. So when we're talking about inflammation, so this is inflammation kind of across the board, whether there's an autoimmune component or not. There are foods that we know that are going to cause problems, right? Like sugar, processed foods, things like that.
right.
And then when you have an autoimmune picture, kind of your immune system's even a little bit more sensitive, if you will. So I think what you were alluding to and asking about are things that we would consider okay vegetables, like tomatoes, peppers, right? Potatoes and eggplant. All of those are in the nightshade family.
Okay.
Technically, even things like blueberries are in the nightshade family. And we think of blueberries as very nutritious, right? Tons of antioxidants, very beneficial for us, very, healthy.
Right.
But for folks who already have an autoimmune picture, this family of nightshades, the tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes, can actually trigger more of an immune reaction. And part of that is because the proteins that are found in that family of foods, yes, that family of foods. So nightshade family also includes other herbs and other plants and stuff as well. But for the most part, we're talking about food. Those can look very similar to our cells. And so they can trigger this kind of molecular mimicry cascade. So then your body, says, hey, this is something foreign that we think could cause a problem. So you created an immune reaction to it. And that pattern or that model of those proteins is very similar to ours. So it may be, like just theoretically, for example, 95% looks like our proteins, right? So then when you get that inflammation, those antibodies floating around in our body, and it comes in contact with our organs, with our cells, with our tissue, it says, oh, okay, this must be what I'm trying to target. Right. And so then you're creating more of an immune response. And so that's how that creates more inflammation.
Okay.
So that's why they have people avoid the nightshades, those tomatoes, peppers, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and potatoes. Yeah.
And see, and that's crazy, because I haven't been told, I've only really been told, black beans and tomatoes, or beans and tomatoes, which we have discussed black beans before, but that makes me a tad bit sad. We eat a lot of potatoes, and peppers are actually something like I've started adding in the past few years that I had never liked before. And so legit find me like some veggies, and you're just going to tell me that they're actually not that great for me. So that's just fabulous.
Yeah. I'm going to help you out, sir, because it is like, I went gluten-free this week. I don't know. It just gets overwhelming because you already feel like so many things are taken from your life, having to deal with this. And then to be added on to like, well, here's a whole list of things you can't eat. It makes me more resentful.
I say things we discussed this week.
Do what?
Those unfair feelings we
Yeah.
discussed this week.
Yeah. So I think where I kind of hold on to hope, Carmen, is that I do believe that you can reverse autoimmune and not be a person that has it. And that I can heal my gut and this is temporary. I don't have to live the rest of my life with no potatoes.
Yeah.
Is that legitimately true? Because I think that's got to be a piece of hope that we've got to be providing people like us, because it's just so overwhelming and frustrating if not.
Yeah, I feel like I'm still I haven't watched enough of the stuff you've done this week to honestly have gotten to the point where I feel like I can reverse this. But at the same time, I have tons of hope because I still feel way better than I did a year ago. So, I mean, even though I haven't gotten to the point where I'm like, oh, I can heal myself, I do think that I'm getting there. But also knowledge is power. Like maybe this is part of the reason I feel like I have my flare-ups, like, and just I just had no idea that eating certain things, like, I mean, I had an idea, but I just didn't realize these foods in particular. I mean, what if that's all it is, and I could just cut back and feel better? Like, I don't know. But no, I still have lots of hope that I'm going to get there. Especially, I really would like to not have to take that one medicine, but we'll just have to see how that goes. The Plaquenil, Dr. Carmen, I had talked to
Yes.
know that it can cause blindness.
Yes.
Because my mom had to quit taking it. She started losing her vision. She actually has RA.
Okay.
And she nothing for it, but she also eats like total garbage. And she doesn't really like healthy foods, period.
Okay.
So wants her to like start having kale in smoothies and things like that to help like her vision. And she still hasn't done it. It's been like 3 months. Hasn't even tried like one. Like, yeah. So
Okay.
I've issues in my family, like genetically. So I'd really like to get off the Plaquenil. And then now summer's coming and my skin is starting to react to the sun again.
Yeah.
So I'm definitely trying to head down the road of feeling like I can heal this and reverse this, because I surely cannot spend the rest of my life being allergic to the sun because of the medicine that might blind me. Like, I just can't do this. Like,
that's not that's not the path that we want to be on, right? Yeah. Okay, so yes, to Kim, to your comment, when we're talking about autoimmunity, right, when we're talking about the immune system, right, we know that 80% of the immune system is in the gut. So when we start to heal the gut, we can reduce these sensitivities to foods, but also triggers to autoimmune flares, triggers to autoimmunity, period. So yes, am going to encourage you to hold that hope. So oftentimes when I tell folks, if they eat a ton of like salsa, right, tomatoes and peppers, if that is a very big staple in your diet, and you have a lot of autoimmune concerns, I have you just consider cutting them out just for 2 weeks. Okay. Now sometimes people don't do a lot of tomatoes or peppers or eggplant or potatoes, and that's okay. But if you find yourself, eating those on a regular basis, cut them out for 2 weeks and just see how you feel. You don't have to do anything else. Okay. And just see how you feel. If things are not significantly different, then you may not be as sensitive to those things, right? This is where everybody's different. So though we do put those nightshade families in the try not to eat those if you have an autoimmune condition, everybody's body's still a little bit different, right? Yeah. So there are folks that I have who have autoimmunity, and they still grow tomatoes every summer and they do just fine, right? Their autoimmune conditions under control. And then we have other people, right? Like they, go out to eat and have a pico and they can't function the next day. So it's very much a spectrum. So I would have you consider seeing how you feel, right? Check in with your body.
Right.
And in the process, we could definitely do things to help to heal the gut, to reduce reactivity and triggers on those like healthier foods, right? Yeah.
So eventually then you would be able to eat them.
Exactly.
Yeah. I was actually going to, that was going to be a follow-up question. And I don't remember what you call that. Like when you just remove, like when you're allergic to things, you're not sure what you're allergic to, the doctor will have you do that. Like where you take something out for 2 weeks, only the one thing, and then you add it back in and take one other thing out or whatever. So I actually was going to ask that because when I first, I had acid reflux, I had to do that to figure out what most triggered that, or, and that's also, I'm glad you said the salsa thing because that's something I've hated like my whole life. And in the past few years have like all of it, like increased the uptake on that. And I actually had a crap ton. And when I say crap ton, because I'm sick, so I went and got my favorite foods, and all my kids like it too. So all of us were chowing down, and I actually like have been hurting yesterday and today. And but I ate so much salsa, but now I'm like, I've been hot. Like, I mean, I'm already sick, but let's add in a big salsa like that. Makes me so mad. It was really delicious though, I'm just gonna say, but very bad choice. So that's what we're gonna start with this week. Next week it's the salsa. We're gonna, it's 2 weeks of that and see how I feel. Oh,
so
be more whatever, and now
sometimes that can be a little bit tricky though, right? Because when you don't feel well, right, when you're sick, when you're in a flare, we often reach for comfort foods. We reach for something that we think, is going to make us feel better because it has in the past.
Right.
And sometimes we don't have the energy to like make good choices, or healthier choices, for things, because you're like, you know what, I just, there's maybe some days it's like I just can't do it. It's just too much, and especially if you're trying to kind of figure it out on your own. And so that's okay. What I would say is that probably smaller amounts of salsa wouldn't have been so painful, right? Like the next day. So you still could have gotten a little bit of triggers, but if you're like, okay, you know what, I really like, this is what I'm jonesing for, this is what I want, but if we limited it to like half a cup, and really savored that and enjoyed it, you can still kind of get the comforts of that, but not as much as the negative effects.
Yeah, I say I'm normally way more well behaved when it comes to that kind of thing. I just I, like I said, like you said, like I think I got, I don't know, a couple hours sleep, and every kid was homesick, and I like went off rails. But normally I am not quite so, but I still would like to see in general the effect of like just cutting it out. And because my husband loves Mexican food, so we eat like 5 days a week at a Mexican restaurant, and I make healthier choices. I don't like eat a ton of chips and salsa at the table. I let myself, like you said, but still, if I'm doing it 5 days a week, it may be, even if it's just a little, times 5. So it's definitely something I will be, that'll be the goal for these next 2 weeks, next 14 days, is to do that, because that's a big, like, it's a big deal.
The thing is at least it gives